well, my car's driving really well. I'm not going to change the oil because that costs too much.
Yeah. I'll wait till it starts
until
making
it
a
breaks
noise.
Down. Yeah, until it breaks down, I'm not going to do anything to it.
Yeah, that's what they do.
It's kind of it, and I know people that take that approach. However, most of us think that is not an effective cost management tool.
Nope.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs and Security First IT. And joining me is Donna Grindle of Cardin. How'd you like that?
Da-da-da.
It's like a wrestling thing. Donna Grindle. So, as this comes out, this is the final day of the HIPAA boot camp. We had an awesome time. Great crowd. Learned a lot, as always.
Yeah, this comes out as they're in the midst of the tech day.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So they'll get to listen to this on the way home.
Yeah, they'll be sick of us.
I was going to say, they won't be listening to this for a week.
At least.
Oh, so what other kind of stuff you got going on? Anything coming up? No.
Yeah, well.
Vacation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing I wish it was vacation. I am doing a lunch and learn for one of the local IT companies. Medicus IT is having me come in and do a lunch and learn.
Oh, yeah.
For their clients. And I didn't even put it on our list. And I've got another thing I'm doing I'm going to be in Springfield, Missouri in October or November. We're still working on that date though. So we're working on stuff. Nothing's official for here. So give us a call if you want us to go wander off and do stuff with you.
That's always dangerous.
I know, really.
So in today's show, we're going to talk about something that always baffles people. When we talk about you need to have documentation about certain things, you need to have the log files, because we often talk about the log files of this and log files of that. But we don't really talk about is which log files and what you should do with them and what does that even mean when we say that. So,
yeah.
So anyway, we're going to find out from Donna where the log files are.
We're going to find out from me. Again, David's done a lot of research in this episode.
I absolutely know. Yeah. So, but yeah, where are you going to drop your logs at?
Right over yonder. Go ahead and drop them over yonder.
Yeah, but I mean, so many things like everything generates logs these days. I mean, I think there are even log files on my phone. I mean, everything you do have log files. Your PCs, your servers, your UTMs, your EHR program, software, email. Good grief, everything has a log file.
Everything's there. So it's really the things that you need to worry about. One of our top downloaded episodes is episode 54.
Man, that's way
back. About that. So here we are, 2 years later, and it's still a top downloaded episode, HIPAA access log audits.
Mm-hmm.
And in there, we talk about, what you go through and all of that, but we don't really dive into specifics about where all those logs are and, which ones should you specifically worry about.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more general. And so I thought today we would take it a little bit deeper and create a bookend kind of episode to go with the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about, they're generated everywhere. In fact, now there's more of them than there were 2 years ago, So everything's there. Am I supposed to be checking every single one of them? And if they're not creating a log, well, we don't need to talk about them too much here, but if you're not getting a log off of it, somebody should be checking that firmware and keeping it up to date.
Right.
But by and large, most of these devices that are out there on your network, they are creating them. And we're going to try to break them down a little bit and explain what's there, and then at least a recommended prioritized list of what to worry about. Because we know, there's only so much time and money.
Mm-hmm.
And so We don't expect you to do everything, but we're going to try to tell you what's the most important, at least from my opinion, and David may blurt out his in the middle at any time.
I am often sharing my opinion.
So, workstations and devices, that's the first thing. So, used to we would just say workstations, but now we really have to look at devices.
Mm-hmm.
And back in 2016 is when we also were first starting to explain the Internet of Threats or things.
Mm-hmm.
And today it's everywhere. Those devices are all over the place. And they're constantly building these logs. And the most common, at least still, workstation is a Windows workstation.
Yeah.
So let's talk specifically about the Windows workstations and what they're doing and what you should worry about. So a Windows workstation is, it's what everybody has at home plus at work. They're just doing some different jobs and hopefully have different security levels on them.
Hopefully.
Unless you're like us where everything's attempted to be clamped down. But the point is that there's so much out there in just a single Windows computer, you would be shocked. The reason we know that most people are overwhelmed and shocked by it is because that's what they use to scam people in those fake Microsoft calls.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you get the call randomly from Microsoft or it's one of the pop-ups,
right?
You go to the website.
Mm-hmm.
I always love those because the computer just starts basically talking to you and terrifying you in the first place. And the computer's telling you have a corrupted system and you need to call Microsoft, and it's a pop-up from a random web page.
Yep.
Both of those are scams, just in case you're not aware. But what they step you through, and the reason I know this is because I don't know about you, David, but it is fun to lead them on.
If I have time, I do mess with them a little bit.
Yeah, it's fun. And in my process, I love it because they usually call at night, thinking they're getting you at home, and they'll call and they're on the phone with you. I, pour a glass of bourbon, grab a beer, sit down, prop my feet up and answer their questions. But they're taking you and they give you these commands so it feels like what you're doing is complicated. They don't even take you through where you're clicking on stuff. They have you run a command that opens up a program instead of having you click through the steps to get to it. So first of all, it seems very, very technical and complicated the way they launch it. When we could give you the steps to launch the event viewer, it's not that hard. But if you want to make it look hard, we can. That's what they do. They make it look hard. And when that page comes up, it looks very intimidating because it's a reference page. It doesn't look like a pretty app with a pretty user interface that we have today. And just on my own desktop, when I was writing this article, I'd been wrestling with my computer all day because I thought it was from something else I'd done because David and I are the type, and all technical people are constantly screwing around with our machine. So, hey, let me tweak this and make a little change here and add this little update. And so I had done something, I admit it, and I was having some problems, but I assumed it was it. And when I opened up to get the proper list, I started seeing all of these errors in my own event log. And I was like, oh, that's why I'm having a problem. I knew what to do once I saw it. Yes, it was something I did. It was just something else. But it is very informative and it does help you. But when you open it up and you see this list and it says just the Windows logs, and there's a lot of other stuff in there, but it has an application log, a security log, a setup log, a system log, and mine even has the forwarded events. So they have you click on, I think, like security, and it's just loaded up with stuff.
Yep.
And you look at that, and if it means nothing, none of the words sound like English to you, then it becomes quite intimidating, and that's how they scare you. And that's when they tell you, you need to let me into your computer to fix those problems. Don't do it. Those aren't problems.
Yeah.
But what they are is it's telling us what the system is doing behind the scenes.
Hmm.
So don't fall for it, please. And if anybody has fallen for it, call your IT people.
Yeah, really.
Right now. But all of those logs are telling us something about what's happening in the system. And that goes for your most basic workstation, my laptop with all the crap I've got on it. Those are loaded up, very full. They have other logs, but those are the ones that are telling you what's happening on the system. The ones that get into applications and services get down a lot deeper. The ones you're going to mostly want to see when we're talking about logs is the application, the security, the setup, the system logs. Mostly the application security and setup, don't you think, David?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And they all have tons of stuff in them. You can get a brand new computer and they still have errors in it. And so it's easy to scare somebody. Unfortunately, it's also easy for somebody to look at it and go, you didn't fix my computer. It's still got problems. No, that error.
Don't go out there and think it means there's a problem. Those things are eaten up with Windows giving you information you don't need.
Yeah. Yeah. You're supposed to have that error.
Yeah, really. You have no idea how much error tossing that Windows programs do. And they're constantly throwing off messages to other things. But it's a good thing when systems are throwing these messages out there because it allows us to know what's going on.
Yep.
So, and of course, there's Ubuntu, those are the Linux workstations and Mac workstations. And then you got your medical devices and your printers and all of that stuff could be making logs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just Windows, but go pull your hardware inventory for all of those devices and figure out which ones are ones you should worry about, which is by itself a tough call.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're starting to even see Chrome OS now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and those are nice. You got to admit it. They're very nice because there's only so much trouble you can get into.
Yeah.
That's why Carla has one. I will certainly know when she listens to this episode, won't I?
Yeah. Well, the new Chrome OS now, they're getting to where you can not just use Android apps with it, which is kind of fairly new, but you can also run Linux kind of inside of it as well. So it's changing. It's going to be an interesting thing to watch.
Yeah, as it grows and becomes a stable platform that it is quite handy though for certain environments, and you've been able to use it in certain environments, and it's very nice. And it is very helpful if everything you do is in a browser.
Yeah. I mean, you almost can't mess it up.
I know. Oh, no, it can be. Trust me.
How do you know? Tell me a story.
Oh, no. It's mostly just, I can't find it. It's the same. It's the same. It's just the browser.
Yeah.
So you have to evaluate all of those workstations that you have out there, no matter what they are, and determine which ones you're going to worry about the most. Well, for me, if I've got some Chrome workstations out there, those are going to be at the bottom of the list. But it's the tough part is, do I worry about the ones who have, elevated privileges? The supervisors and the managers who have the ability to do things or have access to things. It would make sense that I want to keep up with what's happening on their workstations, right? Because they have access to stuff. But on the flip side of that same coin is that we know that insiders making mistakes, or whether on purpose or not, that also is a tricky thing. And the ones that are most likely to fall for phishing and clickbait are often way down, and they have the most basic workstations. So do you monitor those? I lean towards the first more than the latter because there's only so much I'm going to get out of an individual. But you could look at it that you need to review all workstations. That's a little big.
Yeah.
But it's a decision. You could say, I'm not going to track any individual workstations except X, Y, and Z, because the next thing I need to worry about are servers.
Yeah.
We're stepping up the ladder. We started with a little individual computer, and that's all we had to worry about. Now we have to worry about the servers. And servers have Windows servers have similar, the same but different logs. You go to an event viewer and there's just different types of logs out there and a lot more detail. And you want to talk about a chatty Cathy.
Yeah.
Those things talk constantly, big time. And there's tons of information that are in those servers that you absolutely want to, particularly the ones that are like domain servers. If they say, somebody will say, that's your domain server, you don't have to know anything, but those logs are really important. If that's my database server, those logs are really important. If that's the web server, really important. See what I'm getting at?
Mhm.
The servers are really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're serving the traffic on the network. So the one thing that we did point out, we do need to point out on Windows particularly, is that the Windows default size for log files is T90.
Yeah. Need to increase that for sure.
Itsy bitsy. Well, that's not really helpful if you don't even make it through a whole day without writing over stuff. And that could happen on some of these devices, depending on what's going on. And the total size, so this is a recommendation that we have, is no less than 500 meg, but it would be nice to have it at, or no less than 200, it'd be nice to have it at 500.
Right.
Got them backwards.
Mhm.
So ask your IT people, what are your log sizes on your workstations and servers? Because even if you workstations and you're not pulling those logs and looking at them regularly, you're going to have more information available if you up those sizes. So anything to add there, David?
No. The reason for that, is so that if something happens and you have to go back and do an investigation on something that happened, you definitely want to have more to go back on than just a couple of days.
More is better in this case.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, think of it as the internal computer's conversation documenting itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the log files are. I mean, it's the computer conversations being documented.
And there are tools, we're talking about the workstations. There are tools and other hardware you can use that can kind of reach out and grab all those logs and, put them in one place or, create alerts from them and all that. So it'll make the process easier to deal with when you're dealing with a larger environment.
Yeah, those are monitoring and tools and repository tools. The SIM tools, we're going to hit on those a little bit more in a minute because those are definitely a key element. Now, in some environments today, you and I are aware of more and more where they don't even have a server because everything's cloud-based.
Right.
And this is one of your pet peeves when you go in and people are saying, well, you absolutely must have a server to be HIPAA compliant.
Yeah.
Not true.
I've heard it.
No. We've also heard it. It is absolutely not true. It does complicate things, but you can still, what's reasonable and appropriate in your environment.
Yeah.
And if it's not appropriate or reasonable for you to have to manage a server, there's other ways.
Yeah.
So,
Well, sometimes it's kind of like it's nice to have. We had a recent discussion with a client, and they were like, "Well, do we need a server?" And quite honestly, my answer had to be, "I would like for you to have a server because it would make my job easier." But it's only providing management functionality. It's not actually doing anything else for you. It's really doing stuff to help me.
Right. It doesn't provide computing power or tools in any other way than managing the network.
Right.
And what is the price? Let's just throw it out there, and nobody's going to hold you to it. But the last time you priced just a basic Windows domain server, what does it cost?
I mean, you probably $5,000 is probably a good starting point.
Starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I look at that and I look at an office who, you know what, they could get a device that they could use. They could get an upgraded UTM, or they could get that. which one would you have? In a small office, the upgraded UTM could also manage some of the internal stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a lot of different decisions you have to make to determine what's reasonable and appropriate in your environment.
Yeah. And sometimes if it's just a matter of, the IT company says, well, we just want a computer in so that we can do user authentication. Well, number one, that's great and that's necessary, but it isn't necessary to have a server that does that. There are other ways you can do that.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of IT folks that don't know that. They don't know there are other ways to do that. So, you have to have that conversation too.
Yeah. Well, we sell servers, so of course we want you to have a server, and we'll tell you that's all it has to have. But there are cloud-based solutions. There's just a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Which takes us to our network management devices, and these are things like the universal UTM that I just mentioned, which is a universal threat management kind of approach.
Yeah.
Where it's got a lot of this all piled into one device.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the standalone firewalls and routers. There's intrusion prevention, data loss prevention, VPNs, whether they're site-to-site or individual connections. Of course, wireless access point, most often overlooked.
Yeah.
Because they're in a ceiling or on top of a shelf. Those all create a ton of logs. Everything's logging like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And that data is absolutely imperative if you ever have a problem.
Yeah. And this kind of goes into the breadth of what your IT company hopefully is doing for you when they're reviewing logs. So when you hear Donna mention all these things, the firewalls and the routers and IPS and VPN and WAPs and all these other acronyms. And then I'm kind of defending IT companies here, but when you say to an IT company, well, I've only had 2 support tickets this month, you're not really doing that much. And I'm like, Have you seen all the information we have to filter through just to make sure things are okay? It's a ton of work.
Not that anybody's ever said that to David and made him feel this.
Let me get off my soapbox. Go ahead.
But it is true. If your IT company is doing their job, you're going to have access to regular reports that show you problems happened and we fixed them, and you didn't have to call us.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is today proactive management, not reactive. And that thought process of I have to open a support ticket, that's reactive.
Yep.
You don't ever want to have a support ticket. That means they're doing their jobs properly. If you have a tiny little environment and you never have a computer problem, that's surprising. Without somebody managing it. And the larger the environment, even when you have 5, that's when things are still becoming more complex and requiring someone to pay attention to them on a regular basis. So to reiterate David's point is all of this stuff is going on. Somebody should be looking at that. You should count on your IT people to evaluate that and clearly document the findings and to show that maintenance is going on constantly. Therefore, you don't have problems that prevent you from doing your work. It's like, well, my car's driving really well. I'm not going to change the oil because that costs too much.
Yeah. I'll wait till it starts making a noise.
Until it breaks down, I'm not going to do anything to it.
Yeah, that's what they do.
It's kind of it, and I know people that take that approach. However, most of us think that is not an effective cost management tool.
Nope.
It's much more effective to put gas in the vehicle, have an oil change, periodically have a person evaluating it. And even today, my car sends me an email with what its status is. I mean, come on. I love it. I do. Anyhow, these devices are hugely important if you have an incident. An incident could mean you've had infiltration or exfiltration of data. And the way that you can tell is having effective logs on all of those different devices that are managing your network, that are not necessarily servers, they're not workstations, They are network management devices, specific jobs to move traffic around. And if you don't have documentation of how those VPN connections work, did I have a burst of traffic coming and going? Do I have somebody pounding away trying to break into my individual VPN connections? All of those different things you're going to learn from those logs. And there's tools, which is what brings us to the SIM tools, the security information and event management tools, which we say SIM
because we can.
Because we can. But we spell it SIEM.
Yeah. SIEM.
SIEM, but we say SIM. But it lets the IT team standardize all those logs. Those are all going into one repository, and there's software that analyzes them and looks for problems. And the commercial version of these are very expensive.
Yeah. Yes, they are.
Yeah. They're hugely expensive, but the big enterprises, that's what they use. And it requires, it's the same kind of thing like when you have your EHR. These things are like their own standalone applications. You have to have the hardware. You have to have the software. People have to be trained. You have to have ongoing maintenance and regular updates. And people have to stay not just trained to how to use the software, but trained on all the things that they need to be looking for because the threats change. That's why it's hugely expensive. And there's big names like IBM involved in these, and Alien Vault is a huge name in it. SolarWinds, LogRhythm. There's also one called Splunk.
Yeah.
And that tells you the nerds built it. But Splunk has a free version.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all relative. Free does not mean easy.
No, it sure does not.
Yeah. It is not easy to use. There's also Kiwi. What is it? Kiwi. Is it you know what I'm talking about?
Kiwi server.
Kiwi syslog server.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to bring up is a syslog servers will do something similar to a SIM.
Yes. Yeah. So then you just keep moving down, but you are getting things that will at least help. The SIM's actually evaluating the logs. The syslog server's going, let me be a repository.
Yeah, there's
and it just accepts
big
them.
difference of grabbing all the data and storing it somewhere than versus something that looks at the data and creates alerts, which is more ideal. And we're constantly evaluating these types of things, trying to find something that's cost effective because we don't have clients that have 200-300 workstations and unlimited budgets. So we're trying to find something that works in the smaller environments.
Right. And in the larger environments, they're still uncertain about installing some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you talk about the big enterprises, all of them have something, which is why there's so many of them out there. But it's not been priced down to the level where the rest of us can have it. And until, where that price becomes feasible is when it becomes a cloud solution. That's how today smaller businesses are able to have enterprise level functionalities through cloud solutions.
Mm-hmm. That, or you just happen to spend a lot of time learning some kind of open source software methodology that's
right.
Free.
Because everybody always says the free stuff's what you should use.
Yeah, the cost is not in the purchase price. The cost is in the time price.
Yeah, you're going to pay me now, pay me later.
It's a significant cost to learn how to do it. It is not as simple as you would think it is.
No. And it is an investment in maintaining that knowledge. So you can't just assume I'm going to go get one of the free ones. I remember back in the day when EHRs were the new thing and everybody was trying to decide what they were going to do. And there's a free one.
Yep.
There was a free one that was from the VA, but do you see anybody using it? No. In fact, they've stopped supporting it because it becomes too complicated. And
it's like that free security assessment tool.
Yeah, it's helpful. So the SIM tools, they're great, but they're really expensive. Now, the syslog servers are definitely worth it. You have that repository and you can always pull that history.
Mm-hmm.
if you can set that up, and they're not hugely complex. You just set up a machine, load the software, and it is free software, but its only job is to collect data and store it. I don't know about you, but if you are wanting to make sure you've got things covered, it's not a bad idea to consider it.
Oh yeah, but the key to it really is having something where they're automated or a person, but somebody has to look at them. If nobody looks, nobody knows what's happening. It's it's kind of like locking your house up and going away for a year, and nobody's checking it to make sure somebody hadn't broke in. Even if you have an alarm on there, it's not being monitored, so nobody knows anything. You're just trusting that it'll be fine.
Somebody might walk by and look at it and call you. That's what you're counting on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but when you have like a syslog server, that's there as think of it as a backup of your logs.
Mm-hmm.
How about that? You still have to look at your data, yes, but you'll have a backup of the logs for those things that you overlooked, because a lot of times you won't even know what you're looking for. That's where the software that does the analysis and the alerts really come in handy.
Yep.
But if you've got the budget for it, evaluate the SIM tools and get one. If you don't have the budget for it, then evaluate what your options are. And that's where you spend time with your IT team and look at your options. Don't just take one that somebody tells you they know about. You want to look at 2 or 3 to evaluate what works, unless somebody's really good at one of them, and then they have to teach 2 other people. So you go next.
To that same point, though, if you're going to use the IT company and you're going to have them support it, then obviously you want to use what they know.
Exactly. If they don't know any, though,
yeah,
I'm just saying.
And you just grab one off the shelf.
That takes us then to cloud services and the cloud tools. So the things like G Suite and Office 365 and Dropbox and all of those kind of tools that you use, they generate logs. And I know the G Suite logs, we've talked about it before. We're both G Suite companies, or whatever it is the day we're talking about it, what it's called. And they have logs, and they're developing more and more alerts and in easier ways for you from an admin standpoint to get it. And some of them even have the ability to export those logs or import them into other tools. But you have to evaluate what cloud services and tools are you using, not your EHR, but cloud services and tools that you're using to move data around, your emails, as David mentioned earlier, your messaging, which we just talked about, in the last episode. But the important piece is to evaluate all of them and determine what logs you're getting and what ones make most sense for you to track and evaluate on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got your applications, which we always know about. There's the EHR and practice management, and those require something completely separate, more like the Sphere solution that we've talked about many times, because it's behavioral analytics, which is creepy and cool at the same time.
Yep.
But it's looking for what's normal and telling you when there's anomalies. But you don't realize, QuickBooks creates logs. All of these other tools that you use have logs. You should be aware of them and decide whether you're going to look at them from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you say, okay, well, we have logs. Now we know all of our logs. We've got a big pile of logs. What are we going to build with our logs?
Bonfire.
Just poof,
Yeah.
with some put some. Well, never mind.
You build you a log cabin.
I know, but it was back in the day when can't get the fire started. Throw some wild turkey on there. See if that works. Poof. Yeah, it does. But the process now is to say what if. Or when we have an incident,
exactly.
not what if, because you will. And you're going to need access to some of these logs. And some of them are going to be very, very important for you to have,
Mm-hmm.
particularly the network devices. So you want to make sure that you have a plan. And we do know, again, there's limited resources. Here's what your plans. You should have basically 3 projects is the way I've broken it down. One is to make sure all those Windows devices have adequate size log file sizes. So the 200, 500 number.
Right.
Somewhere in there. That is a project. Go send your IT people to work on that. Then you evaluate your EHR and your practice management. How are you auditing those logs? And we've talked about those some other times. I'll include links to those episodes. But that's the one where Sphere, there's other tools like it that do rules-based and all this other stuff, but you need to evaluate them.
Yeah, that's a tough one too, because you're looking at users that are supposed to be on the computer, supposed to be in the program, but you have to determine whether or not they actually are in the place they're supposed to be within the program.
Right. Should they be looking at that particular patient at this particular time?
Yeah. So that's where you have to have the Sphere product or something else. That's a tough one.
Or should they be looking at that particular portion of that particular patient's file at that particular time?
Okay, you just get
there's some sensitive parts of files that get access, which are never a good thing. Anyhow, you got that as a project number 2. It should be its own thing that falls under like MIPS, meaningful use. Yeah, it's its own element, and it should be dealt with by the people that deal with your EHR. What are you doing? How are you accessing that internal use of your system logs?
Mm-hmm.
Those logs, the application logs themselves, they're their own animal. Then the final one is to deal with all of those other things, and that is to evaluate, do you have a SIM tool? Should you have a SIM tool? Should we have a syslog server so the system logs get at least put in a repository? How do we determine which devices we're going to track, and how are we going to evaluate those? I believe you should worry about network devices, then servers, then whatever workstation or other devices, unless you're heavily invested in cloud, and then cloud moves up to where servers were.
Yep.
What, you agree with that plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, along with the network devices, I would reiterate again, like you said earlier, don't forget the Wi-Fi access points.
Right. Yeah, I put those under network devices.
Yeah.
The Wi-Fi access points people don't think about a lot of times, and it's the way that people get in, or they add an access point you don't even know is there,
mm-hmm.
which is even worse. But those processes, if you take with your tech staff and you say, I want you to evaluate this for me and tell me what you're doing and what is reasonable and appropriate in our environment. Don't just go get me a quote for $100,000. That's not reasonable and appropriate. Don't even bring me that. That's wasting my time.
Right.
But worst case, you need to have those IT people have a plan to review your logs, at least on the network devices, to look for problems on a regular basis and give you reports showing they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And even if you do nothing but save off the files periodically so they don't overwrite so often, that would be helpful in the case of an event on the network devices and servers.
Yeah. Because if nobody's looking, chances are you won't find out until the FBI comes knocking on your door, as we've seen recently in the news, and let you know that you had a breach.
And it's quite unfortunate when these things occur, but if you have nothing, that's not the position you want to be in. If you have things, then you can at least say, throw our IT people at it, pull in other IT, let them look through those logs. They have forensics people take those logs and suck them into their systems and do all of that evaluation. And the more logs you give them, the happier they are.
That's the most technical I've heard you in a while. Suck them into their systems.
Well, with that, we're done. As we always say, though, if you're not looking, it just really doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
If somebody's not looking and paying attention, just forget all of the things that we've just said in this episode.
Yeah.
All right.
What is that you said to me or somebody did one time? If you're not looking, you don't know what somebody's cooking.
Yeah. Well, there's always that thing when you're grilling. If you're not looking, if you're looking, it's not cooking.
Yeah.
Well, that applies in the reverse. I want it to cook on the grill. I don't want it to cook at home, so I want to be looking at home and on my networks. So I want to be looking because I don't want to be cooking.
That's right.
Jeez.
Yeah. Thanks for that confusing analogy.
I know. If you're looking, it's not cooking. Don't let it be cooking at your work.
All right, folks. That's our confusing closure of today's show. Remember to follow us on social media or just follow Donna to the store. Either way, it doesn't matter. She's paranoid anyway. Rate our podcasting apps. There's plenty of them out there. Make sure that you spread the word. Let everybody else know about us so that you have more people to find the show. Because that's how people find it all the time. They tell us, I found the show because somebody shared it out.
The more find it, the more likely we are to keep this thing going.
No. As in always, you can send your questions and ideas or pasta mousses or whatever else you have.
Hey, we're going with the Hippopasta mousse. Something's happening.
Or care packages or whatever else. We have people saying all kind of stuff. Anyway, thanks for listening to the show today. Remember, for Donna and myself, HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.